Hi guys, and welcome back to the No Gluten Zone. I create content for people with what I call food issues that can be allergies, sensitivities, intolerances, or just autoimmune issues that affect your diet. I have celiac disease and a few other autoimmune issues that all affect my diet very much. And I am always struggling with malabsorption issues and deficiencies. And I was honestly just doing research for myself. And I started thinking, I am probably not alone in this. And so I decided I would take my research information and share it on a video here with all of you. And I hope that it would bless somebody out there. Hi guys, I just wanted to interrupt your video for one moment. First, I wanted to say a huge thank you to all the people who did subscribe and helped me meet my goal of 500 subscribers. And now I'm onward in my journey and hoping to get more subscribers. So if you're viewing this and you're not subscribed, I would so appreciate if you would consider subscribing to my channel. And if you like the video, give it a thumbs up. If you don't, give me a thumbs down. That way I know how to plan for future videos. Thank you so much. I so appreciate each and every one of my viewers and subscribers out there. Now back to your video. So I was sick since I was a kid. I'm sure I had celiac since childhood, but I was not accurately diagnosed until I was 40 years old. So there was a lot of damage done there all those years, because doctors would not really investigate much. They did a few tests and just said everything's normal when I was a kid. And then once I was an adult, I went back and I was like, I can push now with regular doctors, not pediatric doctors, and maybe I can get more help. The farthest I got was I was told that I probably had IBS. I was told to drink more water and eat more fiber. I know I've talked about this in past videos and it was just ridiculous because I am like famous for how much water I drink. And at that time I was a vegetarian and I ate so much fiber. So it was pretty ridiculous, but it was really just celiac disease being overlooked. I really believe that if they're going to diagnose someone with IBS, that they should automatically be ruling out celiac disease. Unfortunately, we are not there yet. And unfortunately, we really have to do our own research and be our own advocates. The only reason I got tested for celiac disease at the age of 40 was by pushing and persisting. And I kept asking because I had a lot of symptoms. It's October of 25 when I'm filming this. And in 2 more months, it will be 13 years since I was diagnosed, and I will have been gluten-free for 13 years. So I did 3 years ago, I went for my colonoscopy at the age of 50, and they also added on the upper endoscopy to check and see how my small intestine was doing, because the small intestine is where the majority of the damage is done in celiac disease. And the small intestine is also where the majority of you absorbing nutrients is happening. So that's like the worst possible place to get damaged because it's going to lead to a lot of deficiencies. And so what they saw was that my small intestine was healed. There was no evidence of celiac disease, which means that I am doing very well at being gluten-free, and I am very strict. I know not everyone is as strict as I am, but I'm tired of feeling sick and not feeling good and struggling with all these deficiencies. So that is really what drives me to take good care of myself. And so that leads me to wonder, if my small intestine is healed and there's no sign of celiac disease, then why am I still struggling with malabsorption issues and deficiencies? Because I am constantly chasing after a deficiency. I can tell, like, oh, I'm low in iron, or I'm low in potassium, or low in something. Like, there's all these things that I am constantly, I know what it feels like, and I know I need to fix it. And then there's other things I see on my blood work. And so it's just an ongoing thing that I wish I could find a way to just not have to struggle with that, because everyone else I know is not struggling with those things. And it's just a lot of added stress in life, really. And it's the not feeling well in the middle of it all is really is really the hardest part. So I was looking into why you would still be struggling with malabsorption and deficiencies when your small intestine has healed with celiac disease. And I did find a lot of information. And so I thought there's got to be other people dealing with this, and I will share this information and hope to help someone. So I will be looking at some notes that I have here in doing my research. So number one, there could be residual functional damage or altered gut physiology. So even if the villi in your small intestine have grown back to normal, it still may not be functioning the way it normally would if you never had celiac disease. There could be reduced enzyme production in your small intestine. Specifically, the brush border may still produce fewer digestive enzymes or transporters, which would impair absorption of certain nutrients like lactose, iron, and folate. I know iron is one of the biggest deficiencies for people with celiac disease. And thankfully, I don't really struggle with that anymore. I think it was 6 years ago, it finally got picked up by a doctor that I was extremely iron deficient. And I was extremely iron deficient for at least 30 years, 30 something years at least. I do think it originally started with I had a major surgery when I was 12 years old, and they actually wanted to give me a blood transfusion, and it's a long story, but I didn't get a blood transfusion. And I think my iron deficiency started at that time. And it was not fully fixed from the age of 12 to my late 40s when I finally got iron infusions, and I now maintain it with iron pills. There can also be an altered microbiome in your intestines. Long-term celiac disease and the gluten-free diet itself can shift your gut bacteria composition, and that can affect your digestion. It can affect your bile acid metabolism and your nutrient uptake. There can also be post-inflammatory sensitivity, and your intestine may still have some subtle inflammation in there, or some permeability, which we know as leaky gut. And I was tested back in my late 30s. It was right before I got pregnant with my son. I was seeing a naturopath. I was actually struggling to get diagnosed with interstitial cystitis at the time. That's why I was there. And she was looking at my gut, and she did a test, and I did have leaky gut at that time. And then I had to put everything on hold because I found out I was pregnant, and a lot of the herbs and things that she was planning to have me take were not safe during pregnancy. And then just things spiraled out of control, and I was never able to go back and continue. But I do believe I have healed my gut a great amount over the years on my own. And this can all be, even though you're on a biopsy, it appears normal, you can still have this slight inflammation or leaky gut. Okay, so the next big one is small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, SIBO, which I always call it SIBO. And this is hugely common, especially in people with celiac disease. And I tried for years to get tested for this. And I talked to my primary doctor. I told her, it's a breath test for this thing. And she had never heard of SIBO. When I told her it was a breath test, she said, oh, yeah, I see that. And she's, I'm going to order it. And she ended up ordering a test for H. pylori, which that is also a breath test. And it just said I didn't have H. pylori, but it didn't tell me anything about SIBO. So when I went 3 years ago for my colonoscopy, I was seeing a GI specialist at that time. I hadn't seen one in a long time. And so I asked him about SIBO. I had a list of about 5 things I specifically wanted to address with him, and that was one of them. And he said it's hard right now to get insurance to test for that. So he said, I don't even try to fight. He said, especially if you have celiac disease, I will just treat you. You have symptoms, which I did. So he treated me. It was 8 weeks of antibiotics. And then he really stressed, which I love. Most doctors forget to stress this. He stressed the importance of taking really good, powerful probiotics after that 8 weeks of antibiotics. And so I did that. And I really did see improvement in my digestion. The symptoms of SIBO went away. So I really do think that treatment was worthwhile. I try to avoid taking antibiotics, but there is a time and a place for them. And I really think that even though it was a long 8 weeks of antibiotics, I think it was so worth it. And I really recommend that if you have SIBO. The other one is H. pylori. If you have H. pylori, I really do recommend taking the antibiotics for that and get through that and get rid of it, because it can cause so many other issues along the way. I should probably do a video all about H. pylori, because it's really, really serious. I think a lot of people don't realize the seriousness of it. So what I found in my research is that SIBO is very common after celiac disease has been diagnosed. Even in people who are healed, they've been gluten-free, their small intestine has healed, it's still super, super common for those people. And the symptoms are gas, bloating, diarrhea, and constipation. Also malabsorption of your fat-soluble vitamins, which are A, D, E, and K. It could cause a low vitamin B12, low iron, low magnesium, low zinc, and other deficiencies. My research did show that there's a simple breath test, and you can do antibiotics followed by probiotics to treat it. So very simple. I really don't understand why insurance won't just cover the test and get more people tested and more people treated, so they can not be struggling with that. All right, the next big thing I found is pancreatic insufficiency. And I think this is a big one that gets ignored a lot too. So some celiac patients can develop a secondary pancreatic insufficiency because intestinal hormones that trigger the pancreatic enzyme release, like secretin and CCK, can remain very low. The symptoms of pancreatic insufficiency overlap with celiac and SIBO. There can be loose fatty stools, there can be bloating. So you can often think, oh, it's just the celiac causing that, when it's really pancreatic insufficiency. There is a stool elastase test that can check your pancreatic function. So again, more doctors should be ordering this test and getting this looked at for people, because I know a ton of people that have GI issues and none of it is being addressed. The next big thing is just other overlapping conditions. Even with a healed small intestine, there are other GI disorders that can independently, totally apart from the celiac, be causing malabsorption issues. So there could be microscopic colitis, colitis is just a fancy word for inflammation in your colon. And it can be a very, very small amount, so they don't really notice it. There can be irritable bowel syndrome with malabsorption, and there can be a bile acid malabsorption as well. And there's probably more. Those are just the big ones I found. And then the next big thing I saw was dietary factors or hidden exposures. So even trace gluten contamination can sometimes keep a very mild level of inflammation going in your small intestine, and that can be contributing to deficiencies. I have learned in the past during research that every time you ingest even the smallest trace of cross-contamination gluten, it's going to take a minimum of 6 months for your small intestine to fully, completely heal from that. So if you're getting another cross-contamination within that 6 months, then you're pushing it out even more. And it is entirely possible to never even get the full healing. You never make it to 6 months without more cross-contamination. This is why I am so extremely careful in how I eat and what I eat, and checking things to make sure everything is gluten-free. I don't like to be sloppy with this and risk my health because of how long it takes your body to heal and how much damage and deficiencies and all these other things. It's not just, oh, I have a stomach ache, or oh, I have diarrhea, or oh, I've got a migraine. It's not just that. On a deeper level, there's just so much harm to your health happening. So this is why I'm extremely careful. But I know a lot of people are not that careful, and they are constantly ingesting very small amounts of gluten, and that is going to lead to some very serious problems. Also, eating highly processed gluten-free foods. They're often low in iron, fiber, zinc, magnesium, and B vitamins. Very often when you're first diagnosed, I know what I did was I looked at what I normally eat, what I want to eat, and then I tried to find a gluten-free replacement for those things. That's how I got started. because it's really hard to just be like, okay, I can't eat what I normally eat. So what do I eat? And so that's how I did it. To each their own. I'm sure there's a lot of ways to approach it, but a lot of those things are the very highly processed gluten-free foods. And so as time has passed, I have transitioned myself over to more just whole foods, just buying meat and produce and rice and beans. I do dairy too, and eggs. And so just cooking and eating whole foods, keeping them simple when you don't have a lot of time to cook, but you're still eating very good, solid nutrition foods instead of like all the super highly processed, highly refined gluten-free foods that are so abundant out there. There can also be a lack of diversity in your diet or a reliance very heavily on rice or corn-based flours, and those can limit your nutrient intake as well. I think anyone who has their diet restricted for medical reasons, especially when there is suffering involved in those medical reasons, I think we are all at some point we're like afraid to eat. We're afraid to put things in our mouth because we're going to suffer. And it can lead us to being on very, very restricted diets. And nutritionally speaking, that's not ideal. The ideal is always to eat the widest variety of foods that you possibly can. So I am restricted by interstitial cystitis. I'm restricted by eosinophilic esophagitis, and I'm restricted by celiac disease. And so many people have told me like, oh, you need to do keto, or you need to do, XYZ diet, like all these diets. And there's a time and a place for those things. And sometimes they are really for healing your body. I know a lot of people who do carnivore for 6 to 8 weeks just to initially heal their guts. And then they add more stuff in. That is not a long-term thing. Like you are really lacking a lot when you do those really, really restricted diets long term. Unless you have some really extreme case, I really don't think that's ideal. And you're going to have other issues coming from that eventually. Your goal is always to eat the widest variety of foods possible, and whole foods, really nutrient dense foods. That is the best. And I really do strive for that. I've had people tell me like, you need to do this diet and you just don't want it bad enough. I have a lot of discipline. I have a lot of willpower. I can do any diet, but I'm also going to look at what's healthiest for me. And at this point in my life, I need the widest variety of food I can possibly eat to get enough nutrition and good nutrition in my body. All right, the next big section is specific nutrient interactions. So some deficiencies are going to perpetuate other deficiencies. So if you have low zinc, that's going to impair healing and absorption of other nutrients. If you have low vitamin D or magnesium, that's going to impair your calcium absorption. And if you have low stomach acid, which can come from autoimmune gastritis or people chronically taking the PPIs to reduce acid, proton pump inhibitors, those will limit your absorption of vitamin B12, iron, and magnesium. I am in a lot of groups and stuff for iron deficiency because that was such a huge thing in my life. And I can't tell you like how many people are in there. Their only reason to be iron deficient is because they've been on a PPI for years. So PPIs are really dangerous in a deficiency sense, which is pretty important to not have deficiencies. All the nutrients are really important to your health. So that's a very dangerous one. The next section is autoimmune or endocrine comorbidities. So celiac disease is associated with other autoimmune disorders that can impact your metabolism. There is thyroid disease, and it affects your metabolism and digestion. And very often you see thyroid issues in people with celiac disease. A lot of times it's Hashimoto, but it's not always. I personally am hypothyroid, no Hashimoto, but yes, hypothyroid. Thyroid issues also kind of go hand in hand with iron deficiency. There is definitely a connection there. And so I was iron deficient for over 30 years. So that probably contributed very much to my thyroid issue. There is autoimmune gastritis, which leads to pernicious anemia, which is a vitamin B12 deficiency, and that leads to a lot of issues with your nerves. It's a pretty serious issue. I know there can be permanent damage that cannot be reversed if you catch it too late. And then there's type 1 diabetes or adrenal issues that can alter your ability to absorb in an indirect way. And I do know that type 1 diabetes and celiac go very much hand in hand. I even have a friend whose daughter was initially diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, and then they started very shortly after they were suspecting celiac, but they couldn't do the testing for celiac for several months. And they just told them, like, please stay on gluten, otherwise the testing won't be accurate. So it is very, very common. And I know someone else whose daughter was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, and they're always monitoring her for celiac because it could develop at any time, and she's still very young. So what can you do to help yourself in these situations? So you can work with a GI specialist or a functional medicine clinician that specializes in GI. You can get tested for SIBO, pancreatic insufficiency, thyroid issues, and parietal cell antibodies. Thyroid issues seem to be really challenging. A lot of issues seem to be really challenging. Same thing with iron deficiency. Those are things you really need to educate yourself on and be your own advocate, because most doctors just are not fully educated in those areas. And I had a hard time getting my thyroid taken care of. I acknowledged that it was not okay, even though my TSH was high. It was outside of the normal, but it was like, I think it was like 5 or 6 something. And my doctor was telling me she doesn't start medication until it hits 10. And I think the cutoff is around 4. So it's kind of crazy that you would wait until 10 before you give medication. And so I went to a couple of other doctors until I landed on my functional medicine doctor that I still see in addition to my regular doctor. And my functional medicine doctor specializes in hormones and thyroid. She herself is hypothyroid. And so she gets it, and she has handled it so well. So it's important to really seek out someone who is at least educated or goes through it themselves. So it's hard to find, but keep looking. And nowadays, you don't even have to find someone local to you at this point. There's a lot of people out there willing to do Zoom calls, Zoom appointments, and that kind of thing. And they will take you on as a patient, and you can get help that way too. You could find someone who will do micronutrient panels and stool fat elastase testing, evaluate your gut microbiome balance. These are probably things you're going to do with a functional medicine or a naturopath. I don't know that regular doctors are going to be willing to do this stuff. These are hard things to get done, unfortunately. And then review your supplements and absorption forms. Like your methylated B vitamins are much more absorbable, especially if you have MTHFR mutations. Getting chelated minerals and fat-soluble vitamins in emulsified form, they often absorb better. I am a big fan of the Chronometer app, or any app where you track your nutrition. And I've done a video on that in the past. I'll put a link to that video in the description box in case you want to check that out. And I do monitor that. I look at a weekly average of what I have eaten. It only tracks like what you're putting in your body, but it will show me areas where I'm not eating enough of a certain nutrient, and it helps me identify that and tackle that. It does not show how much of that your body is actually absorbing and using and holding on to. So it's good and bad, but I feel like it's better than nothing. And it has helped me see areas where I'm really lacking. And I can see where those deficiencies are coming from, and I can tackle them and handle them and prevent them. Another thing I will say is when you are deficient, a lot of times you don't know how deficient. I mean, with iron, I looked at my ferritin level and I could see it was super, super low on the scale. But a lot of times you're just going off of symptoms. You can't really see that or measure that. And I will say with iron, it takes a lot. Like if you're just meeting your daily need for that nutrient, it's probably never going to pull you out of the deficiency. you're just like barely getting by. So a lot of times it will take a higher dosage or eating more of it to pull you out of it's like getting out of a hole. And then your daily dose is going to hold you and maintain you after you've gotten out, but you need more to get out of that deficiency, if that makes sense. One other thing that I can think of off the top of my head is betaine hydrochloride has been really, really helpful. If I eat, it's basically stomach acid in a pill. And a lot of times we're not, especially as we get older, I'm in my 50s, so that's considered older. And a lot of times we just aren't producing enough stomach acid or digestive enzymes on our own in our bodies to break things down and absorb things. Sometimes adding that can be really helpful. I know someone who could not eat a lot of things. They couldn't eat beef, they couldn't eat dairy. It was a big list of things, and they started taking the betaine with those meals, and it was like magic. And they don't need to take it as much now. It's kind of like it got it going, but occasionally they still take it with like, especially dairy. Dairy is kind of hard to digest. And I will take it at times if I eat and it just feels heavy. It feels like it's just sitting in my stomach kind of heavy, and I'm a little like not feeling great. I will take a betaine, and it usually fixes it perfectly. So I do highly recommend that. Reflux is kind of a tricky thing. I know they automatically want to put you on a PPI. They tell you have too much acid, but there are two sides to that coin. Sometimes you do have too much acid, but sometimes it's a lack of acid that's causing the problems. So that's just something for you to look into on your own and investigate. And again, if you don't have enough acid, taking the betaine would be really beneficial to you. And just one final thing that I was recently learning about when I was doing research was I read this case study on someone who took their child to this natural doctor. This doctor only treats people nutritionally. And so this woman brought her young son in. He was diagnosed with eosinophilic esophagitis, which I was diagnosed with 3 years ago. So that's why I was looking at this case study. And it was very interesting. They found that he had a genetic issue that affected his ability to break down and absorb thiamine, which is vitamin B1, and that was contributing to the eosinophilic esophagitis, and it contributes to other things. I remember there was like nerve issues, especially in your legs, which I do struggle with. I forget what the other things were. I should have looked this up before I filmed, but it's just a side note. I was just going to throw this in here because I thought it was really interesting. And so they initially gave him IV doses of thiamine, and then they continued maintaining it with liposomal thiamine. And so I went ahead and ordered some liposomal thiamine just to see if it would help with the eosinophilic esophagitis and the nerve pain in my legs that I get, just to see, because they actually said in the case study, it actually said that it's very hard to prove that there's a thiamine deficiency, because in your blood work, it can still be showing normal levels, but your body isn't able to use it. So it was a hard thing to test for and to prove. So I thought I would just give this a try, and I'm hoping for good results from it. So I will leave you with that, and I hope this video was helpful to you. Have a great day, guys, and God bless you.